Welcome back to the Holographic Universe. This is part 3 of a 5-part workshop series designed to examine how quantum physics and recent scientific experiments are radically changing our understanding of life, our reality, and our spirituality. In part 1 of this workshop series, we learned that what we have always thought of as our solid physical reality is actually not solid or real at all, but an illusion, a holographic 3D total immersion movie that only looks and feels real to us inside it.
But there's a quote that I like. Very much. It comes from a famous intellectual by the name of Sherlock Holmes. When you have eliminated all that is impossible, whatever remains must be the truth, no matter how improbable. The thing I'm going to tell you tonight is one of those things which seems nutty, it seems wildly improbable, but it wasn't just something that some of us, I wasn't alone in saying this, that some of us just said, one day, maybe the world is a hologram. That's not the way it happened. The way it happened was exactly this way. When you eliminate everything that's impossible, whatever is left over must be the truth. So let me tell you a little bit about where we're going. Good. Okay. What is this thing which Sherlock Holmes might have eventually concluded after trying everything else? And the answer is that in a certain sense, in a certain peculiar sense, the world is a hologram.
Michael Talbot in the Holographic Universe said creating the illusion that things are located where they are not is the quintessential feature of a hologram. If you look at a hologram, it seems to have extension in space. But if you pass your hand through it, you will find there is nothing there. It is relatively easy to understand this idea of holism in something that is external to us, like an apple in a hologram. What makes this difficult is that we are not looking at the hologram, we are part of the hologram. And then in part 2, we learned several very important things, like the fact that this holographic 3D total immersion movie has been downloaded to our brain in wave frequencies from the field, where it is converted into particles and then projected out there for us to experience as reality. We know this from all the brain experiments that have been done, proving that our brain and body know what is about to happen before we become conscious of it.
Now, what you would think would be that if you stimulate the little finger, it takes a finite period of time to get to the opposite side of the cortex, so the patient would report it a fraction of a second later after the stimulus. And when you stimulate it directly, the patient would report it immediately. He found just the opposite. When he stimulated the little finger, the patient felt it immediately, and when he stimulated directly in the cortex, there was a delay.
People become aroused before randomly selected pictures in the future that happen to be emotional, and they remain calm before randomly selected pictures that are calm. This has been seen in heart rate changes, in skin conductance, in the brain, and basically systemically throughout the body.
We found out that this holographic 3D total immersion movie is a unique holographic universe created especially for each individual, not some common, independent, objective reality out there we all share.
And these are called quantum eraser experiments. They found out that you could take this data with these detectors, take all the data, detectors are working, it tells you exactly what each one goes through, but you don't look at this data and you don't look at that data yet, you just take it. Now if you look at it, you'll get this. But if you don't look at it and then you erase this information of which slit they went through, you get this again. You see? So obviously reality is not objective. That's the double slit experiment, and that's why this is such a big deal, because it shows that reality is not objective. There's something else going on here.
What we have instead is a totally dependent, subjective holographic reality that is unique for each individual and based on their observation. In fact, there is no out there, out there.
There is no out there, out there.
There's no out there, out there.
And we discovered that one piece of holographic film can store a lot of different wave frequencies on it, and in order to get a specific object to pop out, we have to shoot the laser beam in step 2 at a specific angle to choose exactly the right frequencies for the apple. We ended part 2 by asking the question, if all this is true, and quantum physics says it is, then who or what acts as the laser gun for us? Who or what is choosing certain specific wave frequencies from the field and downloading them to a human brain to be converted into holograms to become the reality we see and experience? If you did your homework and watched The Truman Show, you will remember this scene.
How do we stop them?
Okay, we're going to be accessing the weather program now, so hold on to your hats. You got that? No, I think we're going to want to localize the storm over the boat. You can get the coordinates for that.
There's no rescue boat. He won't know what to do.
He'll turn back. He'll be too afraid.
There she blows.
Give me some lightning. Again. Hit him again.
God's sake, Chris. The whole world is watching. We can't let him die in front of a live audience.
He was born in front of a live audience.
You can do it! Hold on! Is that the best you can do? You're gonna have to kill me! What you would do with a drunken sailor? What you
Apple Studio, I demand that you cease transmission.
Keep running.
would do with a drunken sailor early in the morning?
Increase the wind.
Increase the wind! I am telling you for the last time.
How close is he? Very close. Capsize him. Tip him over.
Damn you, tricked
No,
dog!
you can't. He's tied us up to the boat.
Shut up!
He's gonna drown and he doesn't even care.
Do it! Do it!
It's clear that Truman himself did not write the script for that experience. I doubt he would have voluntarily chosen to go through such drama. Just as I doubt you would have voluntarily chosen to go through some of the traumatic experiences of your life either, if you were writing your own script, correct? So who did write this scene for Truman? Obviously, the answer is the director who ordered the wind and the storm. So now we have our answer. Ed Harris is the one who is creating all of our experiences for us. He's the one to blame. No? Okay. So let's ask the question this way. Who or what is writing the script for your holographic 3D total immersion movie? Who or what is your director, screenwriter, producer? The best answer quantum physicists have come up with so far is consciousness. Here's how Dr. Amit Goswami puts it.
Quantum physics enables us to see directly that we can make sense of the world only if we base the world on consciousness. World is made of consciousness, world is consciousness, consciousness is the ground of being. Quantum physics makes this as clear as daylight. Because quantum physics shows you clearly that science, quantum mathematics, which is, in our belief, the most fundamental mathematics, most accurate mathematical description of nature that we have discovered. This mathematics shows us clearly that the movement of objects are describable only in terms of possibilities, not the actual events that happens in our experience. Quantum physics calculates only possibilities. But if we accept this, then the question immediately comes, what chooses among these possibilities to bring the actual event of experience? So we directly, immediately see that consciousness must be involved. Consciousness must be the ground of being, of which objects are part, but not all of it. And these objects then can be described as waves of possibility, and quantum physics succeeds in giving this description very accurately and gives probabilities so that we can do science on the basis of it whenever there is a large number of objects and large number of events. But when you speak of individual objects and individual events, then this very intriguing choice, the word choice by consciousness, out of these possible events, the actual event of experience comes in. And so, for the first time, science encounters free will. Consciousness is free because there is no mathematical description of the subject in our science. Only objects can be described mathematically, and only to the extent that there are possibilities. The question still remains paramount: who is the chooser? And when we see that, then we see that the chooser is free. There is freedom of choice. And of that freedom of choice comes our actual experience.
Quantum physics enables us to see directly that we can make sense of the world only if we base the world on consciousness. According to Dr. Goswami, consciousness is the thing that chooses certain specific wave frequencies from unlimited possibilities in the field and downloads them to a human brain to create its holographic experience. So we are going to call this the consciousness model. We had the field model, the holographic universe model, and now we have the consciousness model. I want to be clear that this is not a belief system. There is a very big difference between a belief system and a model. A model is something you build or create based on the scientific evidence you have to date to test a theory to see how well it works. A scientific model is designed to be challenged to see how it performs when applied. On the other hand, a belief system is often formed in contradiction to the evidence at hand and cannot withstand testing and challenging. It's something you're emotionally invested in, attached to, and depend on. In fact, A belief system tries to avoid being tested or challenged at all costs, for fear it might fall apart. And then what would you do? With a model, if it doesn't work, you simply go back to the drawing board and try again. In other words, you're not invested or attached in any way to the outcome of a model, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually, as you are with a belief system. So, let's take a look at this consciousness model. First, you should know that not all quantum physicists agree with this consciousness model, because you can't study consciousness scientifically, as Dr. Goswami pointed out. Instead, they have proposed many other theories. But we are going to follow the vast majority who do use consciousness as the best answer. For example,
quantum physics says something about the role we human beings play in the universe. It says that consciousness is playing a role. It says there's a secret underground that seems to be affecting the reality we live in, and this reality we live in is not at all what it appears to be.
Matter is not what we have long thought it to be. To the scientist, matter has always been thought of as sort of the ultimate in that which is static and predictable. We like to think of space as empty and matter as solid. But in fact, there is essentially nothing to matter whatsoever. It's completely insubstantial. The most solid thing you can say about all this insubstantial matter is that it's more like a thought. It's like a concentrated bit of information.
At its ultimate level, say in M theory or string theory, reality is not solid, it's mostly empty space, and whatever solidity it has seems more to resemble a hologram picture rather than material, harsh, solid reality. It's a shimmering reality that seems to be very susceptible to the power of thought.
What is the relationship between consciousness and material reality, whether or not the material world can actually be derived from a consciousness reality, or whether consciousness itself could even be the fundamental stuff of the universe, so to speak, instead of the cold dark matter or the other aspects of matter that physicists have been looking for. Maybe it has something more to do with consciousness, and in that regard, then we really can think about the universe as being more a state of consciousness, or more inundated with consciousness, much more so than the material reality that we normally look at.
If you put it that there is an intangible world that affects the tangible world of our experience, and if you then say that's what quantum mechanics says, and granted that's a fair way of trying to put into English something which is very, very difficult to grasp, but it then leads quite naturally to the conclusion that quantum mechanics says that there is a spiritual world that makes this choice, that there's another world that is intangible, that affects and influences the physical world. That intangibility, however, is itself the bedrock of physical reality. It may be intangible, but it is, and we can't really say what it is or why it's there, but it is in fact the most fundamental feature of matter. So you could say, well, if it's a feature of matter, that's not intangible. Matter is the most tangible of things. So, these are word games. The fact of the matter is that the matter is not what we have long thought it to be.
There were some very interesting statements in that video. Let's briefly review a few of them. Fred Alan Wolf said, "Quantum physics says that consciousness is playing a role in the universe. It says that there is a secret underground that seems to be affecting the reality we live in." Notice the word affecting. Effect with an E means to achieve something and cause it to happen, or create, whereas affect with an A means to influence. So Fred Alan Wolf was saying, it says that there is a secret underground that seems to be affecting or creating the reality we live in. Then Dr. Jeffrey Satinover said, quantum mechanics says that there is a spiritual world that makes this choice. that there is another world that is intangible that affects and influences the physical world. Notice that Dr. Satinover goes one step further than Fred Alan Wolf when he says that consciousness both effects or creates and influences the physical world. Then Dr. Andrew Newberg wondered whether the material world can actually be derived from a consciousness reality, or whether consciousness itself could even be the fundamental stuff of the universe. So, the simplest and best answer to the question, who or what is choosing certain specific wave frequencies from the field and downloading them to a human brain to be converted into holograms to become the reality we see and experience, is consciousness. So, what goes in place of the laser gun? The answer, according to this model, is no, not Ed Harris, is consciousness. Consciousness is what is choosing specific wave frequencies from the field to download to a human brain to create its holographic 3D total immersion movie. Now, clearly, this is not a linear process as these graphics make it appear to be, but that's the limitation of two-dimensional images. I wish I had a hologram of this to show you. What probably is closer to the truth is something like this in 3 dimensions. And it might even be that consciousness and the field are more intertwined. Be that as it may, are we all agreed? Consciousness is what chooses the specific wave frequencies from unlimited possibilities in the field that it wants and downloads them to a human brain, which then converts them into space-time particles, and out pops our holographic reality. Wonderful. Question answered. Problem solved. We can all go home now. Oops, wait a minute. What exactly is consciousness in this context? That would be a very important thing to know. How can we possibly build a consciousness model unless we know what we mean when we say the word consciousness? Well, let's go back to the experts and find out, what is consciousness?
What is consciousness?
Well, consciousness is a very difficult thing to define.
What is a simple definition of consciousness?
What is consciousness? Where does it come from?
What is consciousness?
People have been trying to explain consciousness and try to figure out what exactly it is, what it means for us as human beings, why we even have it.
What is consciousness?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to give you an answer that you're not going to be happy with. And I'm not happy with it either. I just don't know what more to say about it at the moment.
On a simple way of defining it, it has to do with awareness, and in particular, it has to do with awareness of the self. That's at least how we as human beings have self-consciousness, so that when we look in a mirror, we recognize that it's ourselves that we're looking at and not some other person or some other animal.
There is one can use all kinds of other words: awareness, self-awareness, sentience, feelings, what people call qualia in philosophy. These just seem to me synonyms for it. They're not elucidating what's going on at the bottom of it. Let it suffice to say this. I'm putting myself back on the border again. The phenomenon of consciousness seems to me one of the points at which the collision between the scientific worldview and various anti-scientific worldviews are going to be the most acute. And it's exactly for this reason that I think it's an enormously important phenomenon.
I applaud the honesty and integrity and humility of these experts in admitting they have no idea what this consciousness is that we're talking about. But we really do need to know, so let's dig a little further. For example, is consciousness the same as self-consciousness, or the same as awareness, as Dr. Newberg suggested? Or is it the same as sentience, or feelings, or qualia, as Dr. Albert suggested? Maybe the dictionary can give us a good definition of consciousness in this context. In the Merriam-Webster-Dictionary.com, I found 5 definitions for consciousness. Let's take a look at those 5 definitions one at a time. Definition number 1 has 3 parts. It says, A, the quality or state of being aware, especially of something within oneself. B, the state or fact of being conscious of an external object, state or fact. And C, awareness, especially concern for some social or political cause. So this definition has a lot to do with awareness, both within oneself and without. But it really doesn't seem to fit what we're talking about on the other side of the field. The consciousness we're talking about is much more than just aware. It is making choices and decisions that we are not aware of. Let's go on to definition number 2. The state of being characterized by sensation, emotion, volition, or thought. Mind. No, the mind or emotions is not what we're looking for here either. Definition number 3. The totality of conscious states of an individual. Well, that may be getting a little closer, talking about totality, but it still doesn't help me understand what this consciousness is on the other side of the field. Definition number 4 is the normal state of conscious life, and that doesn't help at all. And definition number 5, the upper level of mental life of which the person is aware as contrasted with unconscious processes. First, we're definitely not talking about mental life here when it comes to the consciousness on the other side of the field. And then, in the experiments in Berlin with the left and right button, we certainly were not aware of the thing that was choosing our holographic experience. In fact, we didn't become aware of it for 6 seconds after the hologram had been chosen and downloaded to our brain. In fact, if anything, the choice of what experience we were about to have, pressing the left or right button, was definitely an unconscious process as far as we are concerned on this side of the field. So definition number 5 directly contradicts what we're looking for. Then I looked up self-consciousness and conscious and self-conscious, but nothing seemed to shed any light on this use of the word consciousness for whatever is on the other side of the field, choosing the experiences we have. So, when in doubt, let's try the Wikipedia. Consciousness is a term that has been used to refer to a variety of aspects of the relationship between the mind and the world with which it interacts. It has been defined at one time or another as subjective experience, awareness, the ability to experience feelings, wakefulness, having a sense of selfhood, or as the executive control system of the mind. As we say in the United States, that makes everything as clear as mud. But the one thing I think we can agree on after all this is that the word consciousness has a lot of different definitions, different connotations, and different uses, which is why we are not making any progress in trying to find out exactly what this consciousness is on the other side of the field. V.S. Ramachandran is director of the Center for Brain and Cognition and professor with the Psychology Department and Neurosciences program at the University of California, San Diego, and adjunct professor of biology at the Salk Institute. Rama says, "We may be forced to admit that consciousness, like infinity and the particle wave concepts in quantum mechanics, is a property that cannot be made intuitively straightforward. Consciousness, like gravity, mass, and charge, may be one of the irreducible properties of the universe, for which no further account is possible. Or, as someone on the internet once put it, a definition of consciousness is as difficult as someone asking you why you like what you like. We're calling this thing on the other side of the field consciousness because it seems to be aware and it is making choices and decisions, things we normally associate with our own consciousness. But then we use the same word, consciousness, for other things on this side of the field, like mind and awareness and mental life and wakefulness and selfhood, that have nothing to do with what's on the other side of the field. So I think it's clear no one really knows exactly what this consciousness is, especially in this context, or how to properly define it. Remember that radio in Part 1 that we took to a tribe in the Amazon? Eventually, they figured out that the music they heard had to be coming from sound waves in the air they couldn't see, and the radio was translating those sound waves into music. I assume they would also at some point later take the next step and ask, who was creating those sound waves? And who was choosing to broadcast certain sound waves on certain frequencies so that when they changed the dial, different music would come out? The natives might actually find out the answers to those questions one day, but unfortunately, we won't. We are incapable of knowing, and always will be incapable of knowing exactly what this consciousness is, simply because we are on this side of the field. And our brains, at least according to Carl Pribram, are designed as holographic receivers and translators, and have no capacity or ability to access or process any information on the other side of the field. So anything we might say about what goes on the other side of the field is simply speculation. Basically, no one seems to know what this consciousness is, and that's probably the most truthful thing we could say at this point. We only know that something, which we are calling consciousness for the moment, must exist on the other side of the field that is choosing our experiences and downloading them to our brains. What we can do is build a model based on the scientific evidence we have at hand and see how well it works. So let's briefly review what we know from the science to be true to this point. Consciousness, whatever that is, chooses certain wave frequencies that it wants from the infinite number of possibilities in the field, downloads those specific frequencies to a human brain, which translates them into a holographic 3D total immersion movie by collapsing the wave function, and then projects that movie out there for us to experience as our reality. We have now arrived at a point halfway through this 5-part series of workshops, and we have also reached the limits of what quantum physics can tell us at the present time. But a few minutes ago, I said we were going to build a model based on quantum physics and the latest brain research to test certain theories of how this holographic universe might work, contrary to everything we've been taught to date. And we can still do that. After all, we're just playing with a model. This isn't rocket science. But we're going to have to switch now from quantum physics to metaphysics. And I want to be honest with you. I said in the beginning of Part 1 that you would not be listening to my theories or my beliefs or my opinions. And that's been true to this point. I have let you hear all of this directly from the experts themselves. That is changing now. As I discuss this consciousness model that many of us have been using and testing for the last few years, it will include some of my own theories based on my research and experience, along with input from others. However, whatever model we build must conform to and be consistent with all the scientific evidence we have to date. This is a prerequisite for any model anyone builds. The first step we need to take is come up with a working definition for this thing we are calling consciousness. Not only a definition, but a new name, so we don't keep confusing it with our own consciousness on this side of the field. We need something specific and clear, even if it's a guess at this point. Something to base this model on. Something we all understand what we mean when we say that consciousness is the thing that is creating our holographic experiences. So maybe it's time to try another approach. It often works well that when we can't figure out what something is, we can start eliminating what we know it is not. Remember what Leonard Susskind said.
But there's a quote that I like. Very much. It comes from a famous intellectual by the name of Sherlock Holmes. When you have eliminated all that is impossible, whatever remains must be the truth, no matter how improbable.
Let's take a few minutes and talk about what we're pretty sure this consciousness on the other side of the field is not, and then maybe we can more easily build a model of what it is. I think we can agree that this consciousness on the other side of the field is not the body, not the brain, not the mind, not the intellect, or anything else in the holographic universe on this side of the field. Those things belong to the human being, the self-consciousness that lives in this holographic reality. It is also not the consciousness you and I have right now, not the self-consciousness that is conscious of one's own acts or states as belonging to or originating in oneself, as the dictionary puts it. All the brain research proves that we are not conscious, we are not aware of the experience we are about to have until after the brain and the body know what experience we are about to have. Until after the experience has been chosen by this consciousness on the other side of the field and downloaded to our brain. Since, in the case of the BBC experiment in Berlin, someone watching our brain activity can know what experience we are about to have as much as 6 seconds before our own self-consciousness knows. So, some consciousness we are not consciously aware of must be choosing those specific wave frequencies from the other side of the field and downloading them to our brain in order for us to have that experience. It's time to call on a channel for help. This channel's name is Darryl Anka, a cousin of the famous singer-songwriter Paul Anka, and he channels an entity called Bashar. This is an audio recording of a session with Bashar in which he talks directly about this issue, using a very clever differentiation between conceiving, receiving, and perceiving. Listen carefully and read along.
Most of you are familiar with the idea that you have a physical consciousness, a personality as a physical being that you relate to as yourself, so to speak. But then there is this mysterious idea of the higher self. Simply put, most of you understand, or at least intuit, that the so-called higher self, well, is relatively non-physical. Even more simply put, you could say that there is a vibrational frequency just above physical reality, just beyond physical reality, in which resides what you might refer to as a template for physical reality, or upon which you construct your physical experience. It is in that template level, just beyond the physical threshold, that the higher self exists. So the higher self is like a guiding principle, a governing principle, so to speak. It might surprise you to know, as personality constructs, as physical minds, you do not conceive of any ideas. What do I mean? The personality does not conceive of concepts. It perceives concepts. It does not conceive them. Here are the three levels. The higher self conceives. The physical brain receives. The personality mind perceives. That's all it does. Any idea, any inspiration, any imagination you have ever had doesn't come from the physical mind portion of you. It comes from the higher self portion of you. Through the receiver, the brain, and is translated by the brain into a vibration that the physical mind then perceives as a reflected reality. One more time, because this is crucial to understand. You don't conceive of any ideas as a physical mind. That's not what the physical mind is designed to do. It cannot create ideas. It can only perceive the result of an idea from the higher self. Now, this may sound at first somewhat limiting, but in fact, it's very, very freeing, because you can all stop thinking. You can all stop thinking you're in charge. You can all stop thinking you have to think of everything. You can all stop thinking that you're the one guiding the ship. You're not. You are just looking at the road. You're just experiencing the path. But the reason you get into trouble, the reason you feel stuck as a physical mind, is because you've been taught to believe that the physical mind is the one coming up with all this stuff. And it's not. So when you try to manipulate it, it doesn't work, because the physical mind is not designed to actually create those concepts. It is only designed to perceive the effect of the creation of those concepts through the receiver, the physical brain. And this allows you to lighten up your load, stop carrying so much baggage, stop trying to do your higher self's job, and just do your own. That's why so many of you are so tired when you are trying to do certain things in a certain way. It's because you're trying to do a job you weren't designed to do. That's exhausting. Stop. You were not hired to do that job. Your higher self already has the job, and it's working for you perfectly. Work with it. Work with it, not against it, by trying to do the job it was designed to do. Just do the job you were designed to do, which is perceive. So again, higher self conceives. Physical brain receives. Physical mind perceives. That's it.
If we combine Bashar's terminology with the terminology we have been using in these workshops, then consciousness, or what Bashar calls the higher self, conceives or creates, the brain receives, and now we know it translates the waves into holograms, and you, what Bashar calls the personality construct, perceive and react and respond. Bashar said some other very interesting things in this session, such as, the higher self is like a governing principle. Remember Professor John Haynes? Is this consciousness on the other side of the field, Bashar's governing principle, the same thing Professor Haynes was referring to when he talked about a deterministic mechanism? Bashar also said, the personality does not conceive of concepts. Of course, Bashar was using this clever language thing with conceive, receive, and perceive, But conceive means to create. So Bashar is clearly saying that it is the higher self that creates, not us, not the personality constructs on this side of the field. The only thing a personality construct, that's you and I, can do is to perceive the effect of the creation of the higher self. In very simple language, this higher self on the other side of the field that is creating our experiences is not us on this side of the field, not any consciousness or self-consciousness we might possess. In fact, according to Bashar, we on this side of the field are incapable of creating anything in terms of our holographic experiences.
It might surprise you to know, as personality constructs, as physical minds, you do not conceive of any ideas. Any idea, any inspiration, any imagination you have ever had doesn't come from the physical mind portion of you. It comes from the higher self portion of you, through the receiver, the brain, and is translated by the brain into a vibration that the physical mind then perceives as a reflected reality.
Bashar also said, you can all stop thinking that you're the one guiding the ship. You're not. You are just looking at the road. You're just experiencing the path. Apparently, Bashar likes to mix metaphors as much as I do. My favorite way to put it is that you, we, I, are not driving the bus. You and I are just sitting in the back of the bus, experiencing the scenery as it goes by. The consciousness on the other side of the field is driving the bus, deciding where to go, where to turn, when to stop, when to go, what scenery we will see, what experiences we're going to have. And our job is to have those experiences, perceive them, as Bashar would say, and react and respond to them in any way we want. This, of course, is a very radical idea. I really should play Dr. Amit Goswami's video again. This is the only radical thinking that you need to do, but it is so radical, it's so difficult, but I won't. And yet, this idea is fully supported by all the recent brain research. We, you and I in the holographic reality on this side of the field, do not and cannot have any power to create our experiences. That's the job of the consciousness on the other side of the field, what Bashar calls the higher self, who is the only one in the correct position to choose the frequencies it wants from the field to create our holographic reality. Remember that according to all the quantum physicists you heard, everything we see in this holographic universe comes from or emerges from the field.
But we can't explain what we do see as matter in these small corners of space and time unless we picture that these matter particles somehow come out from or emerge from these thought wave patterns which are invisible to us.
And remember step 2 of creating a hologram. The laser that chooses the specific wave frequencies to pop out is on the other side of the holographic plate from the hologram. So the source of everything we see in our reality must be on the other side of the field, choosing the specific wave frequencies to create our holograms. Not only that, once the holographic experience has been created and downloaded, we also have no power to change, fix, or improve it either, even though we think we'd like to sometimes because we have judged something about that experience to be bad or at least not what we want. No matter how much we try to use the secret or the law of attraction or visualization or rituals or things like that, as Bashar said, when you try to manipulate it, it doesn't work. However, we do have total power, complete free will, over how we want to react or respond to any experience. So now we know a lot more about this consciousness on the other side of the field. Its job, or at least one of its jobs, is to create a holographic 3D total immersion movie down to the smallest detail and then download it to a human brain. Let me say it again very clearly. We, you and I on this side of the field, are not the ones creating our experiences. We simply can't be. We're on the wrong side of the field to be choosing specific wave frequencies to download as holograms. Of all the new concepts we have talked about so far in these workshops, this one is going to make the biggest changes in your life, in your belief systems, in your reality, and in your spirituality. As Bashar said, this may sound at first somewhat limiting, but in fact, it's very, very freeing. You will experience that for yourself if you decide to start using this model in your life. But for many people, it is also the most difficult concept to accept. Why? In part 1, you learned that the reality you see out there is actually a holographic 3D total immersion movie. That wasn't really a problem for most people. In part 2, you learned you are projecting that movie out there for you to perceive, and that there is no independent, objective reality. That maybe was a little more of a problem. But now I'm suggesting that all the evidence points to the fact that you are not creating the experiences you have in your life. And now we have a big problem. Why? Well, for one thing, you've been taught just the opposite since you were born. Many people have a deeply ingrained belief that says you are the one driving the bus, that you are the one in control, that you create your experiences, that you are responsible for what scenery you see. And they have created an enormous and intricate belief system around that. In fact, chances are you have been trying to be the bus driver for years and years. And that's not easy to give up. You're invested in that belief. You've put a lot of time in using that belief. There's a deeper reason as well that this concept is so difficult. It's because it's the first time the ego has really felt threatened. The ego thinks it's in charge. It was actually designed that way, so it's only doing the job it was designed to do. No judgment here. But it doesn't like you to even consider the possibility that you are not creating your experiences, or at least co-creating them. Its existence depends on you keeping those beliefs. But that's what I'm asking you to do, even just for a short time, maybe just as an experiment. Consider the possibility that you are not choosing or creating or co-creating your experiences. That you, watching this right now, are not the consciousness on the other side of the field and literally have no power on this side of the field to create, change, fix, or improve any experience you have. But you might be saying to yourself, that consciousness on the other side of the field, that's just part of me, the real me, my higher self, as Bashar said it. So in reality, I am creating my reality. It's true that the New Age has gone to great lengths to convince you that you are really this higher self, that all you need to do is spiritually evolve until you realize that and become this higher self yourself. But is that true? Because if it isn't, it can be a very limiting belief system. If you ever want to really confuse someone, make them crazy, keep them under control, or totally frustrate them, just give them a goal that is impossible for them to achieve. I'll admit that there are some people making a lot of money selling techniques supposedly designed to help you become your higher self. It's a very popular idea, and one that very much appeases the ego. But that doesn't make the premise true by any means. Bashar said we should stop trying to be the higher self by trying to do its job. You are trying to do a job you weren't designed to do, he said. Your higher self already has the job, and it's working for you perfectly. Just do the job you were designed to do, which is perceive. Let me give you a couple examples of what I mean. Think for a minute about a trumpet player in an orchestra. If your job was to be the trumpet player, what do you think would happen if you tried to be the conductor? Most likely the orchestra would be in deep trouble, and you would be confused, unhappy, and always dissatisfied. Does the trumpet player choose the music the orchestra plays? No. A good trumpet player knows he's the trumpet player and doesn't try to be anything else. How about the left tackle on a football team? If your job was to be the left tackle, what do you think would happen if you tried to be the quarterback? Most likely the team would be in deep trouble, and you would be confused, unhappy, and always dissatisfied. Does the left tackle call the plays and run the team? No, a good left tackle knows he's the left tackle and doesn't try to be anything else. And now think about a surfer. Does she think she creates the waves? If the surfer believed she was the one creating the waves and tried to do that job, she would be in deep trouble. She would be confused, unhappy, and always dissatisfied, and never get to enjoy surfing. Instead, she waits with curious anticipation to see what wave is created for her to ride next. I am not saying that you are not connected to this consciousness on the other side of the field. We'll talk about that connection in the next workshop. I am saying that you are not it. In the same way, I would say you are connected to your parents or your children, but you are not them. How could you be this consciousness creating your reality when in fact you don't even know what holographic experience is coming up until 6 seconds after your brain and body do? I am saying that this model suggests it's time we stopped trying to do a job we were not designed to do, according to Bashar, face the fact that we on this side of the field are not the consciousness who is creating our experiences, and stop trying to be something we are not and never can be. Is it any wonder that so many people are so depressed, dissatisfied, unhappy, unfulfilled, and frustrated? As Bashar said, they've been working so hard to try to be something they aren't. It's only the ego that would like us to believe that we're more than what we actually are, and in this case believe that we are the consciousness creating our experiences. The way this ego worked for so long was such a perfect mechanism, but now it's time for a new game. We'll also talk a lot more about our relationship with this consciousness in the next workshop. Once again, this model says we are not the consciousness on the other side of the field. We are not our higher self. We are not in training to be our higher self. the higher self is not who we really are, and we are not ever going to be our higher self, no matter how much fasting, prayer, meditation, organic food, or spiritual evolving we do. We simply can't be. We're on the wrong side of the field to be choosing specific wave frequencies to download as holograms. And we literally have no power on this side of the field to create, change, fix, or improve any experiences we have. So I think it's time we come up with a new name for this consciousness on the other side of the field, so we can stop all this confusion using the same word for very different things. Does it really matter what we call it? Can you call it something different than I do, for example? Well, yes, I suppose, although it's always helpful to have the same name for something we want to talk about together. If I call this a chair and you called it a table, conversation would not be that easy. And there's another factor involved here. Those of us who have been living and testing this model for some years now have discovered through experience that words, language, take on a new importance. The man who got me started in this model, Robert Scheinfeld, calls it transformative vocabulary. Basically, we found out that a lot of our language is based on the judgments, beliefs, and opinions we have developed, along with the fears that run our lives, that simply don't express what we want to say anymore in this new model. For example, Bashar called this consciousness on the other side of the field the higher self. That name, frankly, can be interpreted to be very judgmental. The word higher implies that this consciousness is somehow better than, or more elevated, or more spiritual, or more advanced than we are on this side of the field. There's no doubt we're different, but we're no worse or no lower than this consciousness. And I'm sure this consciousness would not want us to think we were either, just as a good parent would not want their child to think the child was somehow an inferior version of them. For the same reason, terms like higher consciousness or higher power or expanded self don't work either. Then there are the New Age terms like universal mind, cosmic consciousness, God ray, divine self, and the list goes on seemingly forever. But these terms all imply that this is a position of enlightenment, an avatar, an advanced soul, and so on, a position you haven't reached, but you should, making you less than in your current condition. By the time we are finished this workshop series, I hope you fully understand that you are not less than anything and can stop judging yourself, thinking you need to be something else you are not. So I'd like to find a name that isn't judgmental or disparaging to us as human beings. But I don't want to use soul or spirit or anything else with any religious connotation. This isn't about theology or ascended masters or higher levels of spirituality. And there doesn't seem to be much more agreement about what soul or spirit means than what consciousness means. René Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." However, in quantum physics, we are finding that the opposite of everything is also true. I am, therefore I think. The consciousness we're now talking about is the I am. You and I and our self-consciousness are the I think. When we're talking about the you and me in our total immersion movie on this side of the field, we could actually call ourselves the finite I, bound by the limitations and restrictions of the holographic universe. When we're talking about the consciousness on the other side of the field, I can imagine that it has more of an infinite nature, not bound by the limitations and restrictions of the holographic universe, maybe including infinite power, infinite joy, infinite wisdom, infinite abundance, unlimited and unconditional love, and an unlimited desire to play and express itself creatively, which is Robert Scheinfeld's model. So I'm going to suggest that instead of calling it consciousness, we call it the infinite I. At least that's a name that has worked very well for me as I test and apply this model in my life. So from now on, through the next 2 workshops, I will be calling this consciousness the infinite I. Therefore, in conclusion, this model says it is your infinite I on the other side of the field that chooses each and every experience you have by selecting specific wave frequencies from unlimited possibilities in the field and downloading those experiences to your brain exactly the way it wants, down to the smallest detail. So what about that old New Age saying, you create your own reality? According to this model, this slogan is not very accurate. What seems to be more accurate is that your infinite I creates your unique holographic experiences, which you perceive, to which you are totally free to react and respond in any way you choose. You could say, your infinite I creates your unique holographic experiences. Not quite as catchy a slogan, but much more accurate. So there it is. This is the fundamental shift that needs to take place in our understanding of how this holographic universe works. That you and I on this side of the field do not create our holographic experiences. That we are not our infinite I. And our job is simply to perceive those experiences created for us by our infinite I and react and respond to those experiences in any way we choose. This is the equivalent of learning that the earth is round and not flat. This is where we have been headed in these workshops. Why is this so important? Because it seems that true joy in life and peace of mind is being able to embrace every moment of every experience equally, without judging one experience to be better or worse than any other experience. When you truly realize and understand that your infinite I is creating each and every experience for you down to the smallest detail, and therefore stop judging and resisting those experiences, it becomes relatively easy, or should I say, relatively easier, to do that. In turn, it means you can truly live in the moment, knowing the experience you are having is perfect, exactly the way it is, with your focus on appreciating what you have rather than what you don't have or wish you had. But this brings up so many questions, like, why would my infinite I create an experience for me that I don't like? Why doesn't my infinite I give me what I want, like more money, a good relationship, and happiness and joy and peace of mind? Why would my infinite I cause me to suffer so much? Am I really just a pawn of my infinite I, like a puppet on strings? These are all very legitimate questions which we will talk about in Part 4 of this workshop, along with the more basic questions of, why would my infinite I create me as a hologram in the first place? What's my purpose in the holographic universe? What's the actual relationship between me on this side of the field and my infinite I on the other side of the field? What game is my infinite I playing with me? we're going to take a look at the answers to those questions in Part 4. Your homework, what I want you to do in preparation to watch Part 4 of this workshop series is, first, watch the movie called The Game with Michael Douglas and Sean Penn, and then practice seeing every one of your experiences as coming from your infinite I, who wrote the script for the holographic 3D total immersion movie you are projecting. Once you have done your homework, please visit www.holographicuniverseworkshops.com for more information about continuing with Part 4 of this workshop series. In the meantime, you can download my free ebook, Butterflies Are Free to Fly, a new and radical approach to spiritual evolution, by visiting www.butterfliesfree.com.